Today's lesson is going to be on 9.5 circle graphs. There's a few things that I want you to know about circle graphs. A circle graph displays data as sections of a circle. How many of you guys have seen a circle graph before? Okay, it's something that we have seen, and it's just a way that we can gather some information. There's something I've written in red that I want in red on your notes. What does it say? Okay, 360 degrees is always going to be how many degrees is in a circle. Now here you can see there is a circle graph of the Milton family's budget. All right, so I've got a couple questions here that I want you to see if you can figure out. Number one, just by looking at that graph, what did they spend most of their money on? Food. Okay, how much of their money was spent on food? 33%. 33% of it is spent on food. I think if your families did an estimate of what they spent a lot of food or a lot of money on, they might see the same exact thing. I feel like that's definitely true about my family. We spend a lot of money on food. Number two, what percent of their budget did they spend on clothes? 15%. 15%. Okay, so those are just a couple things that we can gather from this particular circle graph. Who could tell me something else that you see that you learned just by looking at the graph? Katie?
That the second most amount of money was on rent.
Okay, the second most amount of their money from their paycheck that month was spent on their rent. What else can you see? Is there any kind of comparison that you can do between things they spent?
The least amount of money they spent was on savings.
Okay, it doesn't look like they put too much of their money to savings. All right, they only spent 6% on that. What else?
The second least amount of money they spent was on clothes.
Okay, so look at that. If I was to compare clothes versus food, what did they spend more on, clothes or food? Food. Okay, so there's a lot of things that we can gather from a circle graph. All right, have you guys seen this formula before? Yes, P times F equals is. This is going to be something that we are going to use when trying to find angles of a circle. P, what does the P stand for? Percent. Just like we did on the things that we took our test over yesterday, you always change the percent to a decimal. Now, here's the thing. For us, we knew the of was always our total, okay? Is was the part and of was the total. But for this, the total number of degrees in a circle, we've already learned this, is how many degrees? 360 degrees. So then you know that will always be your of. You won't have to ever wonder or guess, is this my is or is this my of? The total number of degrees inside of a circle is going to be 360 degrees. Now I want you to look at this degrees thing right here, okay? Be really careful with this because a lot of times when people are trying to put a degrees, they get kind of sloppy with it and they end up going like this. They might even have their degrees look real big. Then what does that look like?
3,600.
Okay, if I see that, I might think you're meaning 3,600, okay? So that wouldn't make sense. So just make sure that it is more like this, a tiny circle that is floating in the air. This is asking us to find the angle measure that corresponds to the percent of a circle. So for this one, we've got 90%, and I'm just trying to find what that angle measure would be. What is the formula that we came up with that can help us with this? P times of equals is. Okay, so I've got my percent, which is 90%. I have to change it to a decimal, so what would that be? 0.9, okay, 0.90 or 0.9, multiplied by, what is my of going to be every single time? 360 degrees. And what is 0.9 times 360 degrees? 324 what? Degrees. Okay, so if you're ever multiplying it by degrees, your answer is always going to come out as degrees. Let's go to the next one. This one is only 12% of the circle. You're going to write down your formula first. Then Kyla, what's my P? 12%. So what do I write it for? I've got to change it to a decimal. 0.12. Jakari, what do I multiply it by? 360 degrees. JD, what's my answer? Asia, can you help him out? 43.2 degrees. All right, let me have you guys go ahead and do C on your own. Okay, so we start off with P times of equals is. Change that percent to a decimal, which would become 0.4. Multiply it times the total degrees in a circle, which is 360. And what's your answer?
144 degrees.
144 degrees. Thank you once again for saying degrees. You always want to have your units attached to the answer. For example number 2, we have a table here that shows the result of a survey that asked the students how many siblings that they had. So I want us just to kind of even see for our class. How many of you have no siblings whatsoever? All right, nobody in here has no siblings. How many of you have only one sibling? Okay, so a good amount. How many of you have 2 siblings? How many of you would say you're not on this chart because you have 3 or more siblings? All right, very nice. Well, this is just the results of a survey that these people had taken. What we're going to do is we're going to find the angles that you would display inside of a circle graph. So the first thing we're going to do, we know this is P times of equals is. We're going to take our first percent right here, which is 15%. I have to change that to a decimal and multiply it by what? 360 degrees. What degrees would that be, guys? 54 degrees. Let's go on to the next one. It says this one is 30%, so change that to a decimal and we get 0.3 times 360. I want you to do that on your own, and then go ahead and do the final one also for 55%. Okay, what'd you guys get for that 30%? 108 degrees. Then for the last one, we changed it to 0.55, multiplied it times 360 degrees, and what'd you guys get? 198 degrees. Okay, go ahead and have a seat. I want you to notice one thing about these 3 things. I want you to add up those 3 degrees that we got. Guys, what does it equal? 360 degrees. Does that make sense? Yes, a way to always check this, because you can see right here, if I were to add up these right here, that's 100% of the circle. That's the whole circle, okay? A whole circle should always equal 360 degrees, so the way to figure that out is to simply add 54 plus 108 plus 198, and you always want your total to be the total of a circle, which is 360 degrees. Today we're going to do one final example. All right, so here we go. Find the angles that you would display in a circle graph. We're going to do this the same way we just did the other one. P times of equals is. Let's change that percent to a decimal. So what does 30% change to?
0.3.
0.3. We're going to multiply it times 360 degrees. Michael, what do we get?
108 degrees.
108 degrees. Tell me what to do next, please, Gabby. 0.45. Times 360. And Carlos, what do you get?
$162.
162 degrees. Always make sure you add those degrees. Next up, Alex. How do I do it?
0.25 times 360 degrees. It equals
90 what?
degrees.
Degrees. Always make sure you have those degrees there. That's your way of labeling what this is talking about, okay? So that's our final answer for those 3. Now, how can I check to see if this is correct or not? Add them up. I want you to add up 108, 162, and 90 to see how many degrees it equals. What'd you guys get? 360. So that's just a sign to you that you did it correctly, okay? So tonight's homework is just 10 problems. Go ahead and write this down for me, and that is all you need to know about circle graphs today.